Worrying will get you absolutely nowhere. That is just a waste of energy. Sometimes I have to tell that to myself every day.
You are now listening to the Going North podcast with your host, author and speaker, Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, you're going to hear the voice of a different author share their stories, expertise, and their struggles that they had to overcome in life to leave you inspired to get more out of your life. Be sure to not only listen to this episode, but share with others, connect with the authors, and always advance others to advance yourself. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we're bringing some super special, awesome humans from around the globe. Today is a special occasion. I usually like to say today is no different, but it's freaking different because my goodness. I got to thank Mr. Eminem, Mr. Mickey Mickelson for hooking me up with this super special, awesome human today. My goodness, we've had a couple folks on this podcast who've won Emmy Awards, but this guest has won 37, y'all. 37. Like 3 more to go for a midlife crisis and Emmy Award wins. Like, it's freaking crazy. Over 12 thrillers, USA Today best-selling author. And my goodness, it just keeps going from there. A decorated champion author, won the Anthony Award for Best Novel, as well as a whole boatload, if not probably almost as long as the Great Wall of China, with all the awards she has won. So let's give it up for the fabulous and heavenly HPR herself, Hank Phillippi Ryan. How you doing today, Hank?
I'm great. I'm laughing at that fantastic introduction. I spent the whole day writing, and so to hear those wonderful accolades from you is exactly what I needed right now. There are always times in writing where you think, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so to have someone wonderful like you reminding me that sometimes things do work, that's perfect. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, indeed. It's a delight to have you too, because my goodness, I've probably been binging for the past few hours of a lot of your past interviews and speeches, and you live one heck of an interesting life.
Well, it's interesting. I kind of agree. When you go back and look at the things, my career, as they say, starting at the Dairy Queen in Zionsville, Indiana, that was an auspicious beginning, making dilly bars in the back room and chocolate dip cones, which I can always go back to if this television and writing thing doesn't work out. I always wanted to sort of change the world. That was from the time I was a teenager, sort of this bookish, nerdy teenager, just reading up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house. I was such a loner, and I just sort of thought, I'm going to make a difference in my life. I'm going to change the world. So I started out feeling that way. Although I majored in Shakespeare in college, much to my parents' chagrin, they're like, "Oh, honey, what are you going to do with that?" But I embraced it, and I loved my liberal arts education. But I went into politics straight off. I know it's a touchy subject, but sadly, no candidate I ever worked for actually won. So that's when you have to start thinking about finding another career. So I worked on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. for a while during the Watergate hearings. You talk about history. And then at Rolling Stone magazine for a while, talk about history. And then got my first job in television in 1975, of all things. Bizarrely, covering my first story, one of my first stories at least, was covering the swine flu vaccine.
Oh, wow.
So, I don't know how the world works in such mysterious ways, but there you have it. But I've been a television reporter since 1975, which is kind of crazy. And I'm still on the air here in Boston. And years ago, and we can talk about this, I guess it was 15 or so years ago, I started writing fiction as well, completely on spec with no contract, because I had a good idea for a novel. We can talk about that if you want. And I just was obsessed with writing it. I just knew I had this great idea. Dom, what it's like when you have a good idea. And I came home and I said to my husband, I've got a great idea for a novel. I'm going to write a book. And he's like, great, honey. Do you know how to write a book? And I'm like, how hard can that be? I've read a million of them. So I soon learned how hard that could be, but I was, as I said, obsessed. And I wrote every single second that I wasn't working at Channel 7, weeknights, weekends, weekdays, no vacation, all the time. And that turned out to be Prime Time, which won the Agatha for Best First Novel. And that was the beginning of my career in crime fiction. Just because I was naive and crazy and brave enough to think I could write a book, which is pretty strange. Being a writer is this bizarre combination of confidence and fear. So that's how it all began for me.
And what a great way to begin. It's kind of funny how your first book was titled Prime Time, and that would helped you to propel yourself into prime time, winning your first Agatha.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it. Of course, like all my titles, Primetime had, several layers because it was about it is about, it's still in print. I still get royalties for Primetime. I love it. About a television reporter who's worried she's getting too old for television. You see how I scraped the bottom for that idea. When she was actually in the prime time of her life, and it was prime time for her to succeed. And so I sort of felt that it was the prime time of my life as well. I started writing it in midlife. There's no question that I was 55 years old at the time. And I was sort of thinking, if I don't do this now, when am I going to do it? I thought I have a choice of whether to try something very difficult and new and maybe write a new chapter of my life at a time where I'd already won, 30 Emmys or something. And I had a good career and changed laws and changed lives here in Massachusetts and really done some stories, my producer and I, that mattered. But I just, as I said, I had this good idea. And I thought, if not now, when? And I kind of, when I do a lot of speeches in real life, not only on Zoom, and in the before times, and I would tell audiences that I'm sort of the poster child for following your dreams in midlife. We don't have to pick one road. We don't have to pick one way and stick to that way. If we find something that fills us with passion and joy and we're interested in, why not pivot and do it, or just add something new to your resume, as I did, with much joy, and I continue to love it. I was going to say every day, but I would think most every day. I love it. Writing is a very difficult thing. And so, of course, we all have days where we just think, whose idea was this? And when it turns out it was our idea, that's not a really very good answer. So, it's really, as Anne Lamott said, bird by bird, word by word. You just sort of keep going. You just persevere.
Amen to that. And the fact that you wrote your first book at 55 and it became an award-winning book, and funny enough, everything that entailed all around it, it's just really inspiring for other people to really embrace their dreams, no matter how old they may be, because that's so powerful. It's like you've been writing a book every year minimum since then, and just been getting better with each one.
Oh, thank you. That is part of my challenge. And I think part of all writers' challenges actually is to, it's not only finish the book, but have it be better than the book before, to be more compelling, more interesting, more unique, more intriguing, and better crafted as a writer. I never stop learning or trying to learn about how to be a better writer. And I'm in the midst of finishing my 13th novel now. And I know that I look at it differently than I did than the way I looked at Prime Time, 12 years ago or whenever it was. I love Prime Time, my first book still. And I know that I have always and will always give 100% of my skill to every book that I write. But 100% of my skill is sort of different for every book, isn't it? And it is for all of us who write multiple books, because if we're doing our job, if we're really working hard, then we are getting better. I have a wonderful editor who I rely on, who's worked with me on every book. And we're such a good team. And I now, as I'm in the first draft of a book, I read the book, I'm writing the book through Kristen's eyes as well. I hear her voice and my brain says, would Kristen think that was a good idea? Would Kristen want you to put that there? Or, for in the last book, Kristen said, can you take that kind of stuff out? Why not just take it out now? And so all of us writers have our quirks and our voice. And Kristen has helped me bring out my voice. People have said to me, your books are all different from each other, but they all have the Hank DNA. And that's what I'm trying to perfect, that sort of cat and mouse thriller story where the reader is not quite sure which character is the cat and which character is the mouse. And that's what I'm going for.
Amen to that. And it's really interesting how you put your books together and when you write them, because apparently when, if I'm not mistaken, that you really absorb as much as you can in terms of when you research and then you actually get into the writing piece. Like, so do you not take any notes at all? Do you really hold it all in your head and just let it just explode onto the pages?
Oh, I love the idea of exploding onto the pages. Would that were true. I'm a reporter, and I've been a reporter for all these years, and I'm used to observing and interviewing. And what I do as a reporter is I take a whole lot of complicated stuff and make it into a form that's fast-paced, entertaining, enlightening, important, and new, right? I learned how to write a story over all those years with a beginning, middle, and an end, with a character you care about, with a problem that needs to be solved, where the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. And in the end, you get some justice and you get to change the world a little bit. So that is exactly what I do in my crime fiction. In my newest book, The First to Lie, there is an undercurrent, there's an understory of sort of inside the pharmaceutical industry. So I immersed myself in that for a little while. I interviewed pharmaceutical reps and doctors and researchers in labs and people who knew about how that world worked. And I just sort of immersed myself into that. But then when I actually wrote the book about Ellie, the reporter who's looking into a pharmaceutical company, and the gorgeous Meg, who is a salesperson, a sales rep in that pharmaceutical company, and little Brooke, who is given one of the medications that that company, and Lacey, both given one of the medications that that company produces. I didn't go back and look at my notes. I don't, in fiction, I don't do that. In investigative reporting, I look at my notes again all the time, because I'm madly checking to make sure the facts are correct. But in writing fiction, I'm taking the feeling of the story and I'm trying to make sure it's authentic and feels genuine, and that the people in the story know what they're talking about. But it has to be seamless. It has to be natural. It has to sort of evolve out of real life. So, sometimes I'll look up something quickly, how you spell something or how long something takes, the half-life of a certain something or other. I don't know, but I go back and check the facts like that. But how people think and what they care about, that's what my interviews are often about, less than specific. Of course, there's specifics about how things work. But what I care about equally is why people care and why people do what they do and why people make the decisions that they do. People and companies and families make the decisions that they do. And that's what I think is so compelling about a good psychological thriller. I write cat and mouse psychological thrillers. So those have to have the underpinnings of reality, but the basis of a thriller like that is what people do to each other, how people try to manipulate and deceive each other, how far someone would go to get what they want. So that's the kind of research that you can't look up. That's the kind of human nature research that has to evolve from trying to understand people and listening to people and trying to build or allow a character to be created in your mind that comes across on the page as a real person. So in the Murder List, which won the Anthony this year, in the Murder List, which won the Anthony this year for best novel. I'm going to say this right. I'm going to in my book, The Murder List, which won the Anthony for best novel. It's three lawyers. It's a defense attorney, it's a prosecutor, and it's a law student, each trying to find their way in the world. What do they want? And again, how far would they go to get that? And that's what I'm going for more than, I mean, I know how the legal system works. My husband is a criminal defense attorney, so it's good to have in-house counsel, but it's less about the legal system and more about the people in the legal system. Just like The First to Lie has the underpinnings of the pharmaceutical industry, but it's more about the people, the individuals that industry affects.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So no wonder you're able to surprise yourself every day when you write, because really just basing it off of what you basically may know and study in real life and see in real life and just applying it to the page.
Well, I'm a reporter. I'm a news reporter. So every day as a reporter, I'm going out to look for a story. If I knew what the end of a story was in television, it wouldn't be new. It would just be something that everybody already understood or knew or realized. So when I don't use an outline, if that's what you're getting at, I don't use an outline in my stories at all. I just have one little germ of a good idea. Um, and I type chapter one, and I think, and I often start with the first line. I mean, I actually always start with the first line. I always know what the first line of my book is before I start. And I'm trying to think of if I've ever changed it. And I truly don't think so. I've changed everything the heck else in every book, but not generally I think never the first line. It's always stayed the same. And I just go from there. And that's kind of what gets me to the computer every day is I think, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen next. I can't wait to see what happens next. And I'm the only one who knows that. I mean, I'm the only one who can figure that out. And so I go to the computer every day so I can find out what happens next in the story. And that's kind of the magic. Sue Grafton used to call that the magic, that when the characters feel real and when they start to come into their own, then they advance the story themselves. And I am willing to take the risk as a writer with no outline to just exactly the same way as I do it in investigative reporting, just go in every day and look for the story and see what story emerges. And I'm sure you've had other authors tell you this, and I'm sure it sounds baffling to those people who don't write, and it doesn't happen every day, but when you're lucky, and when you're working, things happen in your book and characters say things and do things that you just absolutely had no idea was coming. And I think, some days I'm typing as fast as I possibly can, so fast that I'm making so many spelling errors that I can sometimes barely read the page afterward because the action is just unfolding so fast. And I heard unfolding so fast that I can barely get it down. I mean, I heard a wonderful interview between Lee Child and Stephen King talk about Mount Olympus. And they each said separately that there were days, on their good days, that they actually felt as if they were channeling the characters. And I, from my little seat in the balcony, really understand that, that on a good day, the book takes off. Now, it's not every day, and you can't rely on it. And many days, I just sit at my desk and type, the boy sat, I'm thinking this is never going to work. And then, but if you keep writing, if you just keep going, I was reading something recently where a writer said, the muse only comes when you're working. And that's right, so that's why I sit my little self down at this computer every day and say, okay, let's see what happens. And you have to be open for the ideas to come. And some days I just think I write a sentence and then I think, wow, that is the worst sentence that anybody has ever written. And then I think, okay, well, let's see if you can write another sentence. And then I think, wow, this is really bad. And I just keep going. And at some point, why I'm writing what I'm writing becomes clearer. And Dom, I don't know how that works. I just don't know. It's just so great that when it does, that I keep pursuing that. I keep trying to see if I can get that to happen again.
Hey, well, I love it indeed, and you're so right. The muse does come when you're working. Like it's heck, even one of my past coaches likes to say, "Ink it when you think it," because sometimes those best thoughts come when you're busy doing something else. You just have to make sure you're able to document as fast as possible.
Isn't that strange? Isn't that weird? Because why is it that the first time you think of it, the first moment that line comes out of your head, that's the best line. And if you don't write it down, you won't remember it the same way. I try to let myself off the hook a little bit about that because sometimes when I think of something like that and I can't write it down, I'll say it out loud. If you say it out loud, it sort of hardwires it in your brain a little bit. But sometimes I just let myself off the hook about it and I say, you know, if I can't remember this again, it probably wasn't that good, and I just let it go because you don't want to beat yourself up over stuff that got away because maybe there was a reason it got away. Who knows? It's just we just do the best we can every day, don't we? And hope that with skill and with a little bit of faith in the process, that what we meant to write in some way emerge.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Because life's too short to beat ourselves up. We do that enough, unprovoked as it is.
Well, it's true. I agree with you so much. And writing is hard work. You know, um, I'm in love with all my readers. They're so smart. The people who read The Murder List and Trust Me and The First to Lie and my new book, which is coming out, crossing fingers, in September. They know how books are supposed to be, and they know what's good. And they have expectations for what a psychological thriller is, that there'll be deception in my books and gaslighting and mind games in my books. And I know that my readers love to guess along with the book and try to figure it out. And I love to play with those expectations. We it's irresistible, isn't it, to try to figure out a crime story when I'm watching TV with my husband or something, and I'll be watching the show and I'll say, oh, it's the sister, oh, it's the brother-in-law, oh, somebody's going to drown because because
Yep.
there's a lake. And my husband says, can't you just watch it? And I say, no, I can't just watch it. I have to guess. And and I know that that's what my readers are doing too. They're guessing along with the story. And I like to think about, here's what you smart readers are going to be thinking now. Watch what I do now. And sometimes I'll get emails from people. I love this when they'll say, oh, I just read your book, The Murder List, and when I finished it, I thought, are you kidding me? And they'll say, I went back to the beginning and read it again to see how you did it. And that is great because my books are fair. All the clues are there. Absolutely everything is there. There's no secret kept unfairly from the reader. It's just that little bit of sleight of hand. That's just that little bit of playing with expectations of my smart readers, that I really love. And I know my readers appreciate that. That's as I was saying earlier, that's the DNA of a Hank book, that you just don't know what's around the next corner.
Yeah, you could always appreciate that, especially since really justice is really the theme for really all the books. Really, just making sure that justice is served for all the parties involved, and love that about it because sometimes folks out there may read some other things and may be like, oh, wow, alrighty then. Maybe not so much justice here, but hey, that's probably a different book. So definitely got to love that about you.
Well, thank you. You're so right and so wise. The theme of justice and truth. I don't mean to sound highfalutin about it, but because I write murder mysteries, I write thrillers, fast paced. Going to miss your stop on the subway thrillers, I hope. But they're also about justice and truth and what that really means. What is justice? Justice, we know this isn't just a jury coming up with the verdict. that's just what 12 people think, but they've decided based on the rules they have to follow in a courtroom. So yeah, that's one bit of justice. There's also, sort of universal justice and karmic justice and emotional justice, and you know how we, what is truth? Is there a true truth? Is there a thing that happened? Or is it just in how we see it, or how we describe it, or how it, or why it matters to us? This, you talk about unreliable narrators. Well, we're all unreliable, right? We all see the world the way we want to, and we all sort of shepherd it and manipulate it to be how we want it to be. And then we try to convince other people that that's true, but that's not true truth. I mean, my book, Trust Me, is all about, it's about a woman trying to write a true crime novel, like In Cold Blood, a true crime book like In Cold Blood, a novelization of a true crime. And, Truman Capote insisted that In Cold Blood was true. But what is truth? There are things he couldn't have known, and there are things he couldn't have researched. There's that reportage element. And in my book, Trust Me, the main character realizes that and wonders, how can you write a true crime book when it's impossible to know the truth? And that's what fascinates me throughout all of my books. How do you know the truth, and what even is truth? And that's perfect for a crime fiction author, isn't it? That's perfect for a person who's exploring the psyche of people and the psychological motivations of people, and when what someone wants crosses a dangerous line.
Heck yeah. You could probably say you probably have an unfair advantage over a lot of other authors with your background in investigative reporting too. So makes it twice as good.
Well, I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise. So, yeah, I've had experiences. You were talking early on about being lucky. I completely have had amazing experiences that if I hadn't been an investigative reporter for all these years, I never would have had. And I know how people look when they lie. And I've been with SWAT teams and in tear gas and in the rabbit warren underneath of the airport where people don't usually get to go, or in courthouses or in prisons and that kind of thing. And I've had people confess to murder, and have people who were convicted of murder and swear they were innocent, as often people do. So yes, I have definitely had those experiences. Now, my books aren't my real life experiences sort of polished into fiction at all. But you're so right that I take those real life experiences, and they've been extraordinary, and made them into elements of my fiction. And that's what makes the fiction feel authentic and genuine, because nothing happens in my books that couldn't really happen. My new book coming out in September is about fame and about celebrity and about the cost of being in the public spotlight. The way I talk about that book is, somebody said, can you talk about your new book in 10 words? And I thought, oh my golly, I don't know. And it's fame, fortune, your perfect daughter. Can you keep one secret? And that is what the book is about. And at the time that you and I are taping this, I don't know the title. So you'll have to at the end of this, you'll have to put the new title in and let people know that you're having breaking news on your podcast.
Yeah. I guess it'll be Spotlight September when it comes out, since the book will be about fame.
Oh, that's great. I love that idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Probably put that in some of your social media posts with the book whenever you decide on the title of the book, or or the company decides the title of the book.
I'll tag you. I definitely will.
Woohoo, I get to be it. All righty. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, in speaking of fame, you've probably been on as many interviews as there are kernels on all the corn in the country. So, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often when you're being in interviewee mood?
Oh, that's so funny. I think I love to be interviewed. It's really interesting for me to be on the other side of the microphone. I'm used to being the one who's being interviewed. I know that one of my first interviews that I did for my books was so funny. I was interviewed by Lee Child for my book, The Other Woman, and I couldn't get myself into being the interviewee mode. I kept asking him questions and he kept saying, I'm asking you the question. No, I know, but I want to ask you the question. So after all these years, I finally realized that I'm supposed to answer questions, and that's fun for me. So, I love to hear. My favorite question is what is the one that people want to know, if they've done research that's kind of scary on me or my books, what is it that comes up? What is it that they want to know? And I love sort of embracing how different the questions often are. And so that's my joy of being the interviewee after all these years. It helps me learn how people think, and that's really fun.
Yes, indeed. Fun on the bun, indeed. Well, this is the first time I'm going to ask this question, but is there a question that you wish interviewers would stop asking you?
Oh, probably. I think I wouldn't say it though, because again, at some point there are questions that I have answered a million times, but it's the first time for each person who's asking me that. So I'm more interested in what the people who are interviewing me want to know more than I am sort of weary of answering the same question, because of course those questions are going to be asked, you know, and great. It's great. It's interesting. No, golly, who was it? I think it was Willie Mays was asked why he played the hardest that he could every time he was playing. And he said, because there might be someone in the stands, a little boy in the stands, I think he said, who's never seen me play. And I think about that all the time, because every interview is the only interview like that that's being done, that ever could be done or ever would be done. It's unique. And so there isn't a question that I get asked over and over, because each interview is separate for me.
Ah, solid indeed. Solid indeed. Since the research is usually required for heavyweights, remember hearing that you wanted to be a cowboy at one point in your younger years. So, do you think there may be a Western thriller in the works in the future?
See, you have done your research. You're amazing. You're dropping little tidbits throughout this interview, which show me that you have really done a lot of reading. And I have to say thank you. That's so respectful of you to do. It's really touching that you have done all that research. So thank you. Yeah, I wanted to be a cowboy when I was growing up. I had two cowboy hats, my mom told me. One, a straw one for the summer and a felt one for the winter. And she said I just absolutely refused to take them off. And we got to have horses when I was growing up. I used to ride, my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library to get books. So maybe that was the transition from cowboy to author, all when I was growing up.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Do you think that's probably why you decided to go with Hank after getting that name? I think it was what, college or was it late high school you got the name Hank?
Oh, my real name is Harriet Ann. And when you're a kid, 8, let's say, and all the cool girls are Debbie and Linda, and you're the geeky, nerdy Harriet. And remember, this was way before Harriet the Spy was written. So there was nothing about Harriet except for Ozzie and Harriet, which I didn't want to be somebody's mom. So I hated Harriet. I hated Harriet my whole life. And when I got to college, on the first day of college, someone said, "You don't look like a Harriet. We'll call you Hank." And I said, "Oh, yes. Okay. Absolutely. Anything but Harriet." And it just stuck. And I don't know who that was. I don't know who to thank or not for that. So I've been Hank ever since my first day of college. So it just stuck. And after college, when I worked in politics and I worked at Rolling Stone and I worked in radio and I worked on television, it just was Hank, and my byline was Hank at Rolling Stone, and it just stuck. it's just kind of interesting because if Harriet the Spy had been written, then Harriet would have been cool and I would have been Harriet. But that's another influence that literature had. The book just didn't come soon enough for my name. Now, of course, Harriet is cool. Harriet Vane and Harriet Tubman and Harriet Blue by James Patterson and all. Harriet's cool now, just kind of 50 years too late.
Man, I got you. But hey, it's cool though. It's cool though, indeed. Heck, probably even some of the reactions you probably got first time folks like, oh, this is Hank here. Like, wait, oh, you're Hank?
Oh, all the time, all the time. And I say, didn't you look at the picture in the back of the book? So that's why I'm there.
Oh man. Well, that's what I'm talking about indeed. So definitely want to be ultra respectful of your time. So coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again with all of your amassed knowledge and experience in the current year of 2021, at least when this episode launches, what advice would you give to yourself?
Don't worry, don't worry. It'll be okay. We worry over every single decision. I think, should I do this? Should I do that? For every day, I think, oh, how about this way? How about this way? What if I do this? What'll be the ramifications of that? I, play out everything. And, I, I had an intern a couple of years ago at Channel 7, apropos of this question. I had an intern at Channel 7, and she was so worried about what was going to happen to her after she got out of college. I mean, she was just a day away from graduation or something. And she said, what should I do? What should I do? And I said, don't worry, whatever you decide will be fine. Just go for it and see what happens. And if you have to pivot, you have to pivot. Or if you get to pivot, you get to pivot. But there are very few things that are utter and unending disasters. So you do the best you can every day and try to be happy and try to live in the moment and try to feel present and try to be optimistic and not be defeated. You just sort of persevere. So I thought what you were going to ask me was, if I were 2025 again, what would I do differently? And I was about to tell you nothing. you know every single thing that I look back on, I think, whoa, I wonder whether that was not a good idea. Every single thing like that I've ever done has turned out in the end to be fabulous, that I wouldn't be where I am now without that. So don't be afraid, be brave, go for it. Nothing happens quickly, and if it does, that's either good or bad, and you don't know when it happens. So just take one step at a time and see what happens. But worrying will get you absolutely nowhere. That is just a waste of energy. Sometimes I have to tell that to myself every day, but I truly believe that. Planning is different from worrying. I'm eager to say planning, being prepared, researching, being ready, being respectful of what you're doing and what that requires. That's not worrying, that's planning. But just sort of free floating anxiety about what might happen, that's a waste of time.
Ah, love it indeed. Love it indeed. Folks definitely got to know that difference between planning and worrying. There's definitely a huge difference, stark difference. Definitely got to use that to your advantage. And heck, even love the answer because that reminded me of the classic spin on you and your husband's anniversary. You could have your very own you never know day if you worry less, right?
Well, that's exactly true. And I love you for this research. My husband and I don't celebrate the anniversary of the day we met. We celebrate the anniversary of the day before we met. And we call that You Never Know Day, because you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. I actually did a TEDx talk about that. You can find it on the TED Talk channel, about how you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. It's called Why I Read the Last Page of Books First. And I'd love your listeners to go check that out.
Ah, yes, indeed. Got to check it out like a library book. And I knew I forgot another cavity because that was the first video I watched of it.
Oh, really? Oh, that's nice.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, indeed, folks. Definitely check out that TEDx talk in the show notes. It's freaking fabulous indeed. Because, Hank here is an inspiration, y'all. She's an inspiration. And the good news is it's far from over because she's still writing goodies. And the goodies that she writes, it's a new one every year. And you can always go back and check out more indeed. So speaking of checking out, what's the best way for folks to check out all the stuff that you're doing, Hank?
Oh my golly, I'll tell it very quickly. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You can find me easily at Hank P. Ryan or Hank Phillippi Ryan. And I'd love people to follow me there and on BookBub. I'm on social media way too much. It's terrible, but that means I'll always be there for you and always answer you. My website is hankphillippiryan.com. And if you click on contact, that comes right to me with nobody in between. So that email from my website from via contact comes right to me. I also have kind of shows, I guess you would call them. First Chapter Fun on Facebook and Instagram with Hannah Mary McKinnon, where she and I every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30 Eastern read the first chapter of a book out loud. And it is hilarious. And we have so many people who come with us. We do it live, what could go wrong? But we love to, it's a discoverability thing. We read one chapter of a new book, and people are tempted and enchanted and find it's a way of discovering a new author. What new book will you discover every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30 Eastern on Facebook and on Instagram? And then I also have an event called The Back Room with Karen Dion, internationally best-selling author Karen Dion, where a couple of times a month we host panels of incredible authors. And I'm talking Joe Finder and Heather Gudenkopf and David Wyden and all, you name it, fabulous authors, Fiona Davis, and I'm going through all the names in my head, Lori Rader Day and Rachel Housel Hall and B.M. Burns and God, Gary Phillips, on and on and on. Go to bksp.org, like backspace, but bksp.org, and sign up for the panels. The panels are amazing because it's really as close up and personal as you can get on Zoom. We limit the attendees so that each person can talk to each author in really a casual conversational kind of way. And every one of our events in the back room has been sold out. So it's free, but we limit the people who can come to keep it casual and open. So I can't wait for you to come join us, Dom. You would really enjoy the back room. So come to bksp.org and sign up.
Woohoo!
But basically, you can all just find me on my website. Please contact me, follow me on BookBub, find me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I would love, love, love to get to know you. And I hope you enjoy my books. The First to Lie is the newest starred review from Publishers Weekly, and The Murder List, which just won the Anthony for Best Novel of the Year. That's a good place to start.
My goodness, my goodness. That's right. I told you, folks. The awards keep racking up, baby. That's right. The decorated queen herself, baby. That's what I'm talking about. I'll definitely be leaving my Dom Hancock to pop in one of those wonderful Tuesday or Thursday sessions indeed in the future. Well, this is usually where I ask folks to leave any closing inspirational remarks, but for some reason this was poking out at me since you wrote your first book at 55 and that became an award-winning book. So any closing remarks for those who may need hope when they may need to start their second career or their second win career?
Yeah, if not now, when are you going to do that? I don't want you to wake up one morning, months from now, years from now, and say, wow, I could have been finished with my book. I could have written my novel. I could have written my cookbook. I could have learned a new language. I could have helped someone. I could have changed a life. I could have done what I wanted to do if I had just started. Stephen King, I read one in some place, Stephen King said, the hardest part is just before you start. Just before you start. So get over that part and just start it one step at a time, one word at a time, one day at a time. And soon you'll think, wow, I did it. It's all, I'll tell you this, I'll leave you with words from my own mom, who when I was writing Prime Time, I called my mother and I was in the middle of it and I was really feeling weary and a little bit defeated. And I said to my mom, I love this book. I love Prime Time, and I think people would really love it, but I'm just not sure that I can finish it. And my mom paused on the phone And then she said, "Well, dear, you will if you want to." And I thought, you know what? Yeah, you will if you want to. So, your choice, listeners, if you have something that you've always wanted to do, you'll do it if you want to. It's up to you. It's up to your passion and your drive and your obsession. Nobody's making you do it except you. So, why not just do it?
Everybody knows that the best listeners listen to this part of the interview when it's all over. To solidify your status as a champion, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, leave a great 5-star review on iTunes, and share with someone that you care about and that would enjoy this content too. Keep being a fabulous, super special, awesome human for making it this far, and I hope you enjoy the next episode just as much.